The Gospel of Thomas, the Nag Hammadi Library uncovering the 114 hidden sayings of Yeshua, suffering and misery as a sign of ego and control in the Gospel of Thomas. In the wisdom reflected in the Gospel of Thomas, suffering is portrayed not merely as an unavoidable condition of life, but as a reflection of the inner state of a person's consciousness. The teachings attributed to Yeshua repeatedly teach that misery, anxiety, and constant struggle arise when the human mind becomes entangled in illusions about identity, power, and possession. When individuals are governed by ego, they begin to measure themselves against others, striving to elevate themselves through comparison, recognition, or control. This mindset creates a cycle of dissatisfaction because the ego can never truly be fulfilled. As long as the self is defined through competition and external validation, the soul remains restless, always seeking but never arriving at peace. The Gospel of Thomas teaches that true awakening occurs when a person recognizes the difference between the false self and the deeper, living reality within. Ego thrives on separation. It convinces a person that they must dominate, outperform, or control their environment and other people in order to feel secure. This drive produces constant tension and suffering because it is rooted in fear of losing status, power, or identity. In contrast, Yeshua's teachings in the Gospel of Thomas encourage the listener to awaken to the inner kingdom, a state of consciousness that is not dependent on competition or superiority. When a person discovers this inner reality, the need to control others dissolves, the habit of comparing oneself to another fades away, and peace naturally begins to replace misery. Comparison is one of the primary tools of the ego, because it keeps the mind focused on measuring worth through status, achievement, appearance, or recognition. As long as a person is comparing themselves to others, they remain trapped in a cycle of pride when they feel superior and insecurity when they feel inferior. Both states keep the mind restless and disconnected from the deeper truth of its being. Awakening consciousness reveals that a person's value does not come from being greater or lesser than someone else, but from realizing the life and light that already exists within them. When this understanding takes root, the need for comparison disappears, and relationships with others are no longer defined by rivalry or judgment, but by clarity, humility, and genuine peace. Pride plays a significant role in sustaining suffering. Pride persuades a person that their worth must be proven through achievements, authority, or influence. When pride becomes the foundation of identity, the individual becomes trapped in an endless attempt to defend and elevate the self. Any challenge to their status feels like a threat, which creates anger, resentment, or despair. The Gospel of Thomas subtly exposes this trap by teaching that the true self does not require recognition or domination. Instead, awakening involves humility, the realization that one's life is part of a greater living reality. When pride dissolves, the heavy burden of constantly defending the ego begins to disappear. Competition is another manifestation of ego-driven consciousness that leads to suffering. In a competitive mindset, life becomes a contest in which people are measured against one another. Success for one person is often interpreted as failure for another, creating jealousy, rivalry, and hostility. This worldview reinforces separation and prevents individuals from experiencing the unity and harmony that Yeshua describes as the kingdom. The Gospel of Thomas teaches that the awakened person does not seek to surpass others, but to understand the truth of their own being. When competition fades, cooperation and compassion naturally emerge. Control is also closely connected to misery in the Gospel of Thomas. The ego attempts to manage every circumstance, believing that security can be achieved through dominance over situations and people. Yet life cannot be fully controlled, and the attempt to do so inevitably leads to frustration and disappointment. When expectations are not met, the ego experiences anger, anxiety, or despair. Yeshua's teachings encourage a different posture toward life, one of awareness and trust rather than domination. Awakening consciousness recognizes that the deeper order of life cannot be manipulated by the ego, but can only be experienced through openness and understanding. Another dimension of suffering described in the Gospel of Thomas is the illusion of separation from the divine source. When people forget their connection to the living reality within them, they begin to believe that fulfillment must come from external achievements or possessions. This belief drives them to accumulate status, wealth, or influence in the hope that these things will provide lasting satisfaction. However, because these pursuits are external, they cannot satisfy the deeper longing of the soul. The teachings of Yeshua reminds listeners that the kingdom is already present within and around them. Awakening occurs when a person realizes that the source of life, meaning, and peace has never been absent. Misery also arises when individuals cling to rigid identities constructed by the ego. These identities may be based on social status, ideology, or personal achievements, and people often defend them fiercely because they fear losing their sense of self. Yet, the Gospel of Thomas teaches that true life begins when these false identities are seen for what they are, temporary masks, rather than the essence of a person's being. Awakening consciousness allows individuals to release these masks and discover a deeper freedom that does not depend on labels or roles. Ultimately, the message conveyed through the Gospel of Thomas is that suffering persists when the mind remains trapped in ego-driven patterns of pride, competition, and control. Awakening consciousness, however, reveals a radically different way of living. In this awakened state, the individual no longer strives to dominate others or prove their worth through comparison. Instead, they live from a place of inner clarity and unity with the divine source. Peace replaces struggle because the person recognizes that their true identity is not the fragile ego but the living light within. When this realization takes root, misery begins to fade and life is experienced as a profound expression of freedom and harmony. You can view and read our full library at gospelofthomasstudy.com. We have so much gratitude that you've taken the time to go within and learn for yourself. It's an enrichment that we will carry with us for the rest of our lives and for generations to come. Have a beautiful day.